It's fairly obvious that when your side of politics is telling the public there's a budget emergency and further budget cuts will have to be taken if you win government, that a cash grab for $20 million for the political parties is not going to go down well with the public. Why did the leadership not realise that within the coalition?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them. I mean, clearly there are austerity measures that are going to have to be put in place because of the budget emergency, and any profligate measure, which this clearly is, would mean that there has to be more austerity somewhere else. So each of these things has to be considered very, very carefully.
So was it a bad judgment call from the leadership team?
Well, I would suggest that Tony would probably admit himself that it probably was, particularly given the public sentiment. The public ultimately are the arbiters of what we do in this place, and the public has spoken very loudly.
But you think if the leadership team had put this to the party room, you would have exposed those problems before it got to this?
I think that is the case. I think when you've got more than 100 people, 100 different minds working on something, people look at things from all sorts of different angles, you have far less probability of having institutionalised groupthink. When you've got a group of 2 or 3, it's very easy to convince each other that everything's hunky-dory with something.
What type of image do you think this leaves politicians with in the public eye now? We see the two political parties thrashing out deals behind closed doors. What type of look is that?
Well, I don't think that the public sees politicians positively in general. As I said at the doorstop this morning, the reality is there are people out there where if we were paid nothing, for example, they'd still think that was too much. So clearly there's negative sentiment out there. And no, it doesn't actually assist in terms of the perception that people have of their politicians.
And just finally, Dennis Jensen, Tony Abbott famously told us several years ago to only take as gospel truth the things he had written down or carefully scripted remarks. Well, he wrote this letter of agreement to the government. Is he now saying we can't trust or accept his written word either?
No, absolutely not. As I said, my understanding is that this was in principle agreement. The Labor Party knows very clearly what our processes are.
It is very emphatic. It does say that the coalition will support this. He CC'd in the Shadow Special Minister for State, the Manager of Opposition Business. Now, if that's not support, what is? And why should the public trust Tony Abbott's word?
Latika, it still comes where ultimately the party room has to agree to things, and there have been occasions in the past, this isn't the only one, where the party room has come to a different view on the leadership. I mean, the ETS is a classic example where we had a change of leadership due to an issue of policy and a disagreement between the leadership and the party room. The party room are the ultimate arbiters of what goes through and what doesn't, and so it must be said that something is not coalition policy until it has been agreed by the coalition party room.